Welcome to the CACFP training, Session 11A Multi-Site Sponsors. This training is for non-school district sponsors and school districts with childcare sites. In this session, we will go over what is considered a multi-site sponsor, the additional requirements for multi-site sponsors, the role of the site monitor, and using the site monitoring form, including how to review supporting documents, complete a 5-day reconciliation, and go over a sample completed site monitoring review form. Let's start with some definitions. A site is a place that has its own physical address and administers reimbursable meals for CACFP. Therefore, a multi-site sponsor is a child nutrition program sponsor that has more than one CACFP approved site. Sites can be either affiliated or unaffiliated. An affiliated site is a site that is owned in whole or in part by a CACFP sponsoring organization, meaning that it is a legal entity of the sponsor, while an unaffiliated site is a site that is legally distinct from its sponsoring organization. Sponsors with unaffiliated sites have additional responsibilities compared to sponsors with only affiliated sites. Refer to the CACFP Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 13, for more information. When a sponsor adds one or more sites, they become a multi-site sponsor. There will be additional requirements beyond the ones that single-site sponsors have. Here are some of the requirements. It includes submitting an updated management plan to ODE-CNP which reflect the changes in the program. Multi-site sponsors will also need to submit an annual budget to ODE-CNP every year. In addition, sponsors will need to add sites and identify whether they are affiliated or unaffiliated sites on CNP Web, train site monitors, have a pre-approval site review at new sites, and have a schedule for conducting site monitoring throughout the year. This training will focus on site monitoring, which makes up a large part of the additional requirements for multi-site sponsors. Having a trained site monitor will be very important since they will be the ones that make sure your participants are receiving the benefits of the CACFP and that your program is in compliance with meal requirements. Meal requirements include ensuring that required components are offered for the CACFP meal pattern, creditable foods are served in adequate serving sizes, meals are consistent with menus, valid medical statements are on file, and a correct meal service style is used. The role can be difficult since the site monitor will need to maintain a balance between being a trainer and compliance officer while representing your sponsoring organization. Note that the site monitor cannot be a staff member at the site they are monitoring, and they must be an employee of the sponsor because CACFP management may not be contracted out to another entity. For non-school district sponsors and school districts with childcare sites, site monitoring reviews are required to be conducted 3 times a year at all sites, and 2 of the 3 reviews per site must be unannounced. An unannounced review means that the site staff are not notified before the review occurs. Unannounced reviews should be unpredictable so the site monitor can observe usual practices at the site. One of the 2 unannounced reviews must include a meal service observation. For best practice, it is recommended that all site monitoring reviews should include unannounced and meal service observations. The site monitoring reviews must be less than 6 months apart, using operating months only, and new sites should be reviewed within the first 4 weeks of operation. So for example, a site that closes during July and August can schedule a review for October 15th, February 7th, and September 20th. For after-school at-risk sponsors who are also on the Summer Food Service Program, one of the 3 reviews can be scheduled for summer meals. If a site monitor sees a problem at a site, the problem must be documented on the site monitoring form, and technical assistance must be provided to site staff on the spot or with follow-up training. The purpose of the site review is to identify, retrain, and resolve problems at each site. This is the site monitoring form. Sponsors must use this site monitoring form since it contains all the required components of a site monitoring review. Part of the form can be completed by the site monitor prior to going on site. You will want to focus on problems that were present during the last monitoring review and make sure that these problems have been corrected during the current review. The site monitor will review licensing information, menus, medical statement, meal counts, and attendance records. Staff training documentation should be reviewed to make sure that all staff have had annual training. Site monitors should check if there are any claim reconciliation issues between meals claimed and available records. Before going on site, it is important to check CNP Web to make sure that the meal times listed on CNP Web are accurate. If there are any discrepancies that arise during the review of documentation, make notes on technical assistance or training that you will need to provide. For a full list of all records to be reviewed, check the CACFP Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 13, Section B. Once the monitor is on site, check any documentation that were not able to be reviewed off-site. If a meal observation is required, observe the entire meal service and check that the meal matches the written menu and that the meal service is correctly implemented. Food safety and sanitation should be checked, and the monitor should note if civil rights requirements were met. Records that were kept on site should be reviewed at this time, and if the site had problems previously, the monitor should check to make sure that all problems have been resolved. Finally, a 5-day reconciliation should be completed if it had not been previously completed during the pre-review preparation. A 5-day reconciliation is a chart that determines if the meal counts are accurate. It is a required component of all site monitoring reviews. This is the table for the 5-day reconciliation that is on the site monitoring form. The site monitor will pick a consecutive 5-day period of time within the current or previous month to see if the meal counts are accurate based on the attendance records for those same 5 days. To complete the 5-day reconciliation chart, you will need the number of enrolled participants and license capacity information. You'll also need the attendance records and the meal count records for the 5 consecutive days that were chosen. Note that this can be done prior to the review as a desk audit, if the site monitor has access to the records. The 5-day reconciliation has 5 steps. First, look at the attendance and meal count records for 5 consecutive days within the current or previous month. The 5 days should be the 5 days of service prior to the review for the current month or the last 5 days of service for the prior month. Next, compare the attendance for those 5 days to the number of enrolled children at the site. Then, compare your attendance to your licensed capacity. In both steps 2 and 3, the attendance should be equal or less than enrollment and capacity, whichever is lower. Then, fill out your table using the meal counts and attendance numbers. Finally, compare your meal counts to the attendance. If your meal counts are higher than your attendance, then you will disallow the meals and/or snacks that were claimed in excess of attendance. Meals that are served in excess of attendance are not allowed to be claimed as reimbursable meals. The site monitor will have to disallow these meals on the table for meal disallows, which can be found on the site monitoring form. To disallow a meal, the sponsor should have a system for recording meals that are disallowed for reimbursement on meal count forms, in addition to using the table of meal disallows to ensure that these meals are not claimed for reimbursement during meal count reconciliation and claiming at a later date. In addition to disallowing these meals, the site monitor should speak to the classroom teacher or staff who is in charge of the meal count and attendance to find out where the problem is occurring. Additional training may be required. In addition to the 5-day reconciliation, other meals may be disallowed by the site monitor as well. This may be due to many reasons, but a sample of some common reasons for disallowing meals can include missing meal components, inadequate portion sizes, point of service meal count errors, and milk substitutes provided to participants without a milk substitute or medical statement on file. Now that we have gone through the general requirements for completing a site monitoring review, let's look at the sample site monitoring form that has been completed. Here is the first page of the site monitoring form. In this example, the site monitor is visiting the Sunshine Center for the first monitoring visit of the fiscal year. Site monitoring is required to be conducted at every site, and the site monitor should schedule their reviews for the year in advance. Sponsors can print out all copies of site monitor review forms and fill out the site names and addresses to help facilitate scheduling. The site monitor will enter the date of their visit and their arrival time. When they are leaving, they can enter the time of their departure. Check the corresponding box if this is one of the 3 regularly scheduled visits or an additional follow-up visit to provide technical assistance or to check on implementation. Check if this is an announced or unannounced visit. Remember, at least 2 of the 3 visits must be unannounced. For best practice, all visits should be unannounced. The sample form has been filled out for a sponsor who is OCC licensed. Sponsors who have alternate approval or other federal, state, or local approval can fill out the applicable lines. If you are uncertain about how your site qualifies, review the CACFP Policies and Procedures Manual, Chapter 2, Application and Renewal. One of the 2 unannounced visits must include a meal observation. For best practice, all visits should include a meal observation. When conducting a meal observation, make sure that meal times are marked. The site monitor will want to check CMP Web before the visit to make sure that CMP Web is up to date if meal times have been shifted. If there is a discrepancy, make sure to update CMP Web. Check which types of meal service style is used and which meal the site monitor is observing. The site monitor will want to check what has been planned for the day before the meal observation, and once at the site, observe whether the menu that is served matches the written menu. As you can see, there was a minor change in the actual meal served in this example. While this example does not change the meal pattern, check to make sure that the menu served meets the CACFP meal pattern and the portions served are adequate for the age group. It is highly recommended for site monitors to bring the CACFP food chart to the site review as reference. For any changes to the actual menu, make sure that a working menu is updated for your sponsor's records. Stay for the entire meal and make sure that all requirements are met, including point of service meal counts. Write down the notes on the report if you observe any problems with meeting CACFP requirements at the site. Address all problems either on-site or follow up at a later date. Make sure all food safety regulations are being observed. Next, check to see if the Building for the Future and Justice for All posters are displayed at a location visible to the public. Ask your staff if they understand the civil rights procedure and are able to locate the civil rights log. Make sure the civil rights complaint forms are available in other languages if needed. Parts of record keeping can be completed before the review during a desk audit. If records are not available prior to the visit, they can be reviewed while on site. In this example, while the site staff documented substitutions on the working menu, they failed to collect a valid milk substitute form for a child who is served soy milk in place of cow's milk. In addition, after reviewing meal counts and attendance records, the site monitor found out that attendance records are not being accurately maintained for all participants, resulting in errors with the 5-day reconciliation. No infants are in care for this example, and the site does not vend meals. Click on Not Applicable if the question does not apply. When it comes to staff training, check to make sure that staff have been trained on CACFP guidelines based on their assigned duties. If there are consistent errors with meeting CACFP guidelines when it comes to meal service or record keeping, staff retraining might be required for all site staff. Write down notes under Section 8 Comments. Make sure to note any training that was provided or any follow-up technical assistance that was needed. If disallowing any meals, note it here with the reason why those meals are disallowed. In the example here, you can see that staff was retrained on collecting milk substitute forms for a child that is served soy milk. The meal was disallowed since without the milk substitute form on file, the meal is missing the fluid milk component. The site monitor will follow up in a few days to make sure that the milk substitute form was collected and on file. In addition, attendance was not accurate, as we'll see when we look at the 5-day reconciliation. Retraining was required there as well. Site monitors should carefully review this section prior to future reviews to see if problems from previous reviews have been corrected. In Section 9, the site monitor looked at the last review and noted that the point of service meal count was not done correctly last time, but was correctly implemented this time. Here on the last page, we have the completed 5-day reconciliation table. The site monitor used the attendance record and the meal count record for all classrooms and filled out the chart for the meals and snacks that were claimed for CACFP reimbursement. Site monitors can choose 5 consecutive days in the current or previous month. If the 5 days are in the current month, it should be the 5 service days prior to the day of the review. If the 5 days are in the previous month, it should be in the last 5 service days of the month. At this site, breakfast, lunch, and PM snacks are served. Look at the highlighted meal counts for PM snacks. Do you notice anything strange about the meal counts? The meal counts are higher than attendance. Meal counts greater than the attendance are suspect, since you cannot serve meals to participants that are not present or claim more than 1 meal of the same meal type per participant. If you recall from Section 6, Record Keeping on page 2, you'll notice that there are questions on the accuracy of the attendance records and the 5-day reconciliation. In this example, the site monitor asked the room teacher why there were higher meal counts than attendance, and the reason was that the classroom teacher forgot to update the attendance of the participants who arrived late to their room. This meant that several participants were not marked on the attendance for 4 days. These meals in excess of recorded attendance will have to be disallowed because the meal count cannot be backed with accurate attendance records. All disallows should have reasons noted on the site monitoring review form. Note that dates that meals are disallowed and note the number of PM snacks that are disallowed. Write down the reasons the snacks were disallowed. Provide retraining to the room teacher on accurate attendance records. Note retraining on the form in Section 8. The next time the site monitor is on review at the site, they should visit the same classroom to ensure that attendance records are up to date. At the end of the site review, go over your findings with the site representative. This may be a site supervisor, a lead teacher, a program supervisor, or any staff who is in charge of overseeing CACFP operations at the site. Make sure that you sign and date the form, and have the site supervisor sign and date the form as well. Once you're done with your review, remember to add your time departed on the first page. Sponsors are required to use the ODE CNP provided forms. If sponsors would like to make minor adjustments to the form to better suit your programming needs, contact your assigned child nutrition specialist for approval. So in this training, we learned that a multi-site sponsor is a sponsor with more than 1 CACFP approved site. We learned that multi-site sponsors have additional requirements, including site monitoring. Site monitoring will require having a site monitor who can monitor each site at least 3 times a year, with at least 2 unannounced visits and 1 meal observation. Finally, we went over the site monitoring review form that the site monitor will complete. Resources for multi-site sponsors can be found on ODE CNP's webpage. The At-Risk After-School Care Handbook provides additional information for at-risk after-school sponsors. Thank you for participating in the multi-site sponsor training. If you have any questions, please contact ODE CMP. We greatly appreciate the work that you do to fuel Oregon's future.